Hello and welcome to the Northern Myths podcast, where we explore the myths and legends of Northern Europe from an archetypal perspective. I'm Luke DeWolf.
And I'm Dan Larrabee.
Today, we're continuing our series on the Kalevala with Kalevala Runo 7, Väinämöinen and Louhi. This is going to be a pretty interesting poem following up on where we left off, which I'll get into in a moment, just to give you a recap of where we were just before here. But we left on kind of a cliffhanger, and this poem is going to get into what Väinämöinen does in the aftermath of getting shot down by Joukahainen's crossbow at the end of the last episode.
That's right. Well, I'm always glad to return to the land of heroes, but it's going to be interesting because Väinämöinen's in kind of a bind right now, so we don't know what's going to happen. And this poem, we've been seeing a lot of shorter poems in Kalevala, but there's a lot of good stuff to talk about and dig into here, so it's going to be a good one.
That's right, and I think the whole point of this poem, just not to really get into the specifics before we get to them, but we're definitely going to be seeing how Väinämöinen deals with being forced into a chaotic, unknown situation, and that's going to be the bulk of the poem here. And we're also going to get to introduce reintroduce, I suppose, a couple of important characters. I would call them major secondary characters at the very minimum, with Louhi. And Louhi, we talked about briefly in the first Runo, just a light introduction there, but she is the mistress of Pohjola, and she is like the ruler of the land of the unknown. And we're going to get to meet her, and we're going to get to see what kind of character she's shaping up to be and how she relates to Väinämöinen. And she is going to set in motion the bulk of the rest of the Kalevala. As far as I'm concerned, she sets in motion the major storyline that's going to take us through the most of the rest of the Kalevala, with some side stories kind of here and there. We're not going to be with Väinämöinen the entire time, but when we are with him, we're going to be basically dealing with the aftermath from this episode. So definitely a big one to kind of get us moving onto the next stage of the journey.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, I guess before we dive in, just our usual housekeeping sort of thing. If you would like to get in touch with us, we're on all the major social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube as well. And we're under either Northern Myths or Northern Myths Podcast on all these platforms. And we're also personally on Twitter at NorthMythLuke and at NorthMythDan. So if you'd like to get a hold of us, you can do so by any of those methods. We're always happy to get a comment or a message, and we do our best to respond to them in a timely manner. So that's just some of the ways you can get in touch with us. We also always appreciate a share on any of these social media platforms. So thank you very much if you choose to do that. And the other thing we also always appreciate are reviews, especially on iTunes, but on any podcast platform, or if you're on YouTube, subscribing is highly appreciated, and if you can give us a like as well, that's also something that would help us along. And other than that, we do also have a couple of ways you can support the podcast if you choose to. We've got a merchandise store on our website. Link will be below. That where you can purchase T-shirts, mugs, things like that with some of our designs. And from there, we've also got a list of recommended books and music from that includes a lot of things that were inspired by books that have helped us to learn and grow. And if you go onto that page and follow the links, that'll take you to Amazon. And if you choose to make a purchase there, we'll get a little piece of that through the Amazon affiliate program. So any of those ways you can help support the show if you so choose. So thank you very much if you do choose to do that. It's a big help. Am I forgetting anything, Dan?
Not right now. I think we're pretty good to dive into the land of heroes.
Okay, well, let's do it. Kalevala Runo 7, Väinämöinen and Louhi. This will be lines 1 to 42. Back to the poem. Väinämöinen, old and steadfast, swam upon the open ocean, drifting like a fallen pine tree, like a rotten branch of fir tree. During 6 days of the summer and for 6 nights in succession, while the sea spread wide before him, and the sky was clear above him. Thus he swam for 2 nights longer, and for 2 days long and dreary. When the 9th night darkened round him, and the 8th day had passed over, sudden anguish came upon him, and his pain grew ever greater. From his toes his nails were dropping, and the joints from off his fingers. Then the aged Väinämöinen spoke in words like those which follow. Woe to me, unhappy creature, overburdened with misfortune. I have wandered from my country, and my ancient home abandoned. 'Neath the open sky forever, driven along in sun and moonlight, rocked about by winds forever, tossed about by every billow. On the wide expanse of water, out upon the open ocean, here I live a cold existence, and 'tis painful thus to wallow, always tossing on the billows on the surface of the waters. Now, alas, I know no longer how to lead this life of sadness, in this everlasting trouble, in an age when all is fleeting. Shall I rear in wind a dwelling, build a house upon the waters? If I rear in wind a dwelling, then the wind will not sustain it. If I build a house on water, then the waves will drift it from me. Dan, what do you think of that?
Well, that is certainly a heck of a way to start off a runo. I mean, poor Väinämöinen, he's going on his journey, and there's a little bit of a flashback to the last runo. He's looking for a wife in Pohjola, so into the unknown, and he goes on his horse, and he's thinking, okay, that's not going to be a bad journey. Then Joukahainen shoots his horse, and Väinämöinen falls into the ocean. And this isn't like, one of those scenic things that you see on like YouTube or Instagram where people are jumping off of a cliff into the ocean and it's all fun and games. No, he's been swimming in the middle of the ocean. His fingernails are falling off. His joints, they seem to indicate that his fingers are like falling off, and he's not having a good time being tossed about. It's just awful. Like no one would want to be in that situation. And archetypally, that is being thrown around in the unknown, in the unconscious. You're deep in. It's one of those times in your life when, and I'm sure most people have had this, where things just don't seem to be working, and you try to establish things or and Väinämöinen talks about this. Oh, can I build something here to sustain myself? And no, because everything just gets ripped apart, and you just kind of have to endure it. And we see that he endures it for 9 nights, which is neat to see. Again, we're seeing the number 9 come up again as sort of the completion. We didn't get to it yet, but I'm sure something will happen that will change his status. But we see again, and 9 is a number of completeness, because every number from 1 to 9 is in it. You can make any number from that. I guess they didn't have zeros yet, but that comes to the West later from China. But so it's an important number, at least mythologically. And we have Väinämöinen just like eyeball deep in the chaos, in the unconscious, in this environment that humans can't survive in for very long. But at the same time, you need to be able to survive in it for a while so that you can have that the required amount of chaos to keep on living, right? So he's probably too much on one side of like too much chaos, but you can't just I mean, the opposite of being in the ocean would be living in the desert and you'd die of thirst, right? So
Yeah, it's not that being out in the ocean, which symbolically means certain things, which again you've touched on that, but the opposite. That's an interesting point to bring up something like a desert. There would be no potential there. It's very hard for people to live in a desert, and to really they're clustered along rivers and oases and or maybe places where they manage to dig a well, something like that. But yeah, the desert is very inhospitable, and at least Väinämöinen kind of being in the ocean. I mean, he's not drowning, so that's something. But on a symbolic level, he certainly has the potential to bring something out of it. But I liked this that you mentioned was that he's in the unconscious. That really is true for where he is. And I think there is a distinction in this case between, say, the unconscious, which the ocean symbolizes. It's a version of the unknown, but it's different from the underworld. It's different because there is an actual underworld that we're going to visit eventually. But this is kind of more like he's being thrown into just this chaotic unknown situation, and he's barely got a handle on how to deal with it. He's coming up with some ideas, and that's a positive thing, but he really can't get grounded. And that's I think the key point here is that he can't get grounded. And yeah, the imagery is really quite something. I mean, fingernails, toenails, all that kind of falling off. I mean, that's not pleasant for sure. I think that might be alluding to something like when you get into these situations, it can actually be hard on your physical health as well. Because I think this is something like I don't even just think that he's in the unconscious for an arbitrary reason. I think this is saying something like maybe he's all the way too depressed, something like that. Like if you recall the adventures he was on previously, and if you haven't, that's all of our episodes on the Kalevala so far. Runo's 3, 4, 5, 6 have all kind of dealt with that same story arc. Was that Väinämöinen didn't get the woman he wanted to marry, and he was only just setting off on a new adventure. Like his mother had indicated to him that he could go to the land of Pohjola to potentially find a wife, but then he gets just cut down in the middle of that journey. And to me, that's something like if you get up the courage to just go and try something, that's just the worst time to get shot down, cut down. Like it really saps motivation, I think, and it could take a lot to recover from that. And I think the language that Väinämöinen is using, I mean, woe to me, unhappy creature overburdened with misfortune. Like he's really wallowing in it. And I think on some level, he's bringing up the potential of making a dwelling or something like that, only to shoot it down himself. It's not like he's going and physically trying to do something. He's like, well, I might as well not do anything. I can't really do anything here. The entire picture is like, even this hero, even this great hero figure, when cut down in the middle of trying to get something done, he's having a hard time with that.
for sure, it's kind of like when you decide to go off and start something brand new that you've never done before, and you start it and it's completely foreign to you and you're just terrible at it. And like, it doesn't matter what you're starting, we're all terrible at those the first time we do it. And you emerge. That's why I think we see the symbolism of life coming out of the ocean as well as like through evolution, stuff like that. There's always that idea that life comes out of the water, but like until it manages to come out of the water, you're just kind of floundering around, right? So no matter what you're doing, it's pretty easy to get discouraged right away because you're terrible at it and you don't know what you're doing. And in a lot of cases, you don't know what you don't know, like what you're doing. Like it's a swirling mess, and you can, like, if it's like weightlifting or exercise, you can hurt yourself, and it's like, well, crap, why am I doing this? And so it's I think a very common symbolic situation that we all find ourselves in when you're in the unknown. You're trying to, he went off on his horse. He thought things were gonna be fine in this new thing where he goes to the new land. He's gonna find this beautiful woman to marry, and it's gonna be great. And there's maybe a bit of arrogance or just maybe ignorance of, well, no, you're going into the unknown, so you actually don't know what's going to happen. He went off as prepared as he could be, but it was nowhere near prepared enough to, avoid the first part of the adventure where he's swimming in the ocean alone and, being tossed about against his will.
Yeah, well, he didn't expect Joukahainen to shoot him. That wasn't one of the things that he prepared for. And maybe there was something he could have done for that had he taken that into account. But yeah, he was just not able to deal with that sudden taking him completely off course. Like, the horse that he prepared is probably dead. No, definitely no longer with him or available anymore, which, as we've talked about, as far as travel goes, like, that would have been a big deal. And really the entire situation that this has brought up is that this is like a major setback for him, and he really hadn't had this before that we've documented. Like, Väinämöinen was basically born and then creates the world and puts the world into order, sort of thing. And he's like the master of his entire domain. He's able to overcome Joukahainen. When this young upstart thinks he's better than him, he's able to really quickly sing him some magic and get him, well, prevent him from beating him, sort of thing. And he expected some kind of just some rewards from that. And so the first setback was the loss of Aino, who was promised to Väinämöinen in marriage, but his way of dealing with that was to go on this adventure to Pohjola and to seek out a new wife, but immediately he's cut down. So this is like a setback, like right in the middle of trying to get over another setback. You know what I mean? But this is bigger. I think what this is saying is bigger.
For sure. And I think too, we're seeing the results of, we've talked about it before, sort of chaos where you can't control the things that are going on around you, but there's also chaos brought on by malicious intent. And the one that's brought on by malicious intent is a lot harder to deal with because you're dealing with someone else that actually is out to get you rather than just, the everyday bad luck or weird stuff happening. And Joukahainen was definitely maliciously out to get him. I mean, he was trying to kill him. So I think that factors into it too, where it throws you in, if someone's actually out to get you, it throws you into, I guess, the deep end of chaos, because not only are you having to contend with just things not going right, you're also having to contend with someone purposefully sabotaging you.
Yeah, the entire situation, I mean, I think it's something that if you've ever been in this situation, you could understand and empathize with how that kind of makes it harder, sort of thing. But the result is that Väinämöinen is now floating in the unknown, and he's definitely not happy, not doing well, doesn't see a way out. Shall we see where we go from here?
I think so.
Okay. This is going to be lines 43 to 102. Back to the poem. Came a bird from Lapland flying, From the northeast came an eagle, not the largest of the eagles, nor was he among the smallest. With one wing he swept the water, to the sky was swung the other. On the sea his tail he rested, on the cliffs his beak he rattled. Slowly back and forwards flying, turning all around and gazing, soon he saw old Väinämöinen on the blue waves of the ocean. What has brought you here, O hero, wandering through the waves of ocean? Väinämöinen, old and steadfast, answered in the words which follow. This has brought the man to ocean, plunged the hero in the sea waves. I would seek the maid of Pohjola, woo the maiden of Pimentola. On my journey swift I hasted on the ocean's watery surface, till about the time of daybreak came I after many mornings. Where is Luotola's deep embayment, hard by Joukala's rapid river, when my horse was shot beneath me by an arrow launched against me. Thus I fell into the water, in the waves I plunged my fingers, and the wind impels me onward and the billows drift me forward. Then there came a gale from the northwest, from the east a mighty tempest. Far away the tempest drove me, swimming from the land still further. Many days I have been floating, many days I have been swimming on this wide expanse of water out upon the open ocean. And I cannot now conjecture, cannot guess, nor even imagine how I finally shall perish, and what death shall overtake me, whether I shall die of hunger or shall sink beneath the waters. Said the bird of air, the eagle, let thy heart be free from trouble. Climb upon my back and seat thee, standing up upon my wing-tips. From the sea will I transport thee, wheresoever thou mayst fancy. For the day I well remember and recall a happier season, when fell Kalevala's green forest. Cleared was Osmola's famed island, but thou didst protect the birch tree, and the beauteous tree left standing, that the birds might rest upon it, and that I myself might sit there.
So we have a great hero coming to rescue Väinämöinen in the form of an eagle, not the greatest eagle, but certainly not the smallest or weakest eagle either. And we see him coming to save Väinämöinen because of the birch tree that he didn't take down while sort of clearing the way for agriculture and sort of that progress of civilization. And there's a few reasons. So first, I want to get into the symbolism of the eagle. The eagle it's a very interesting symbol because you see it throughout Europe, throughout Asia, and Africa as a symbol of the father of all fathers, the king of heavens, king of birds. It's like the patriarch. It's the highest form of father that you can get on the earth before you get into, a father god or a sky father. And one, I find super interesting that like everyone sees it this way throughout the world. And if you've ever seen an eagle, they're pretty majestic creatures. They're pretty amazing to see. So I definitely understand that part. But having that symbol, it was a good omen. It showed you that, the gods were with you, that they were listening to you, that you were favored by them. And having an eagle save Väinämöinen is exactly proper because as a symbol of the highest father, the eagle is one that creates order in chaos. So we now have this Väinämöinen literally has this oasis of order in the swirling chaos that's going to be able to bring him out of the ocean and out of the unconscious. The other interesting thing about the eagle resting at the top of the birch tree, well, there's a few ways you can go with the symbolism of the tree. The one that I think works best in this situation, particularly because of the geography of the story, it being Finland and in Europe, where they have a tradition of a world tree. The tree connects heaven, earth, and the underworld, or the unconscious. Sort of, there's that, and you can't have any without the other. You can't have the top of the tree without the roots. You can't have either without the trunk. So what's going on in the, normal human world, and if you don't have the top of it, there's nothing for the tree to feed on, because you've got the leaves and everything that feed the tree from light, right? So they all work together. You have to have it all together for it to be a good, healthy tree that's going to stand. And then you have, the eagle perching at the top. Well, of course, it's the highest father perching at the top of this structure that reaches down into the underworld, but it's kind of the perfect example of what we're called to be, in that, if we're the human, if we're stuck in the middle between the pull of like heaven and the underworld, we can look at the tree and be like, no, we need both levels. We need the underworld and we need heaven in order to be alive and full and healthy. And I think the eagle comes down, the symbol of the highest father comes down and says, Väinämöinen, I'm going to save you because you kept this tree. It's that he kept that knowledge of the importance of the tree, that center of the world, that symbol of balance, saying, you didn't just take out everything so that, humans could become civilized and everything. There's a balance there, and because you recognize that balance, there's somewhere for me to live, and now I can come down and save you in these most terrible of circumstances. And if we look at Väinämöinen as the symbol of culture, you can see that if you have a well-balanced culture, just the social norms that we have can actually save people from, going too far in one direction, right? And becoming unbalanced. There are safeguards built within a well-balanced civilization that stop you from just going off one end or the other too far.
Yeah, and the thing with the eagle here too, that I liked here was the mention that he's not the largest, not the smallest. It's also that he's kind of an average eagle, and I think what that says is that even the ordinary creatures, whatever, are recognizing Väinämöinen's importance. So it's not like, hey, the king of the eagles has come down. It's like, here's just a normal, regular eagle. And to me, I think that stewardship and that understanding of the things that need to be in place for culture to survive and for it to grow and flourish are there. And then, yeah, this is interesting. It's like the mechanism by which Väinämöinen would get saved. This is all kind of coming back to him. Like, he put this in motion. He didn't necessarily intend to put it in motion, though. Like saving the birch tree, I think he had some idea that he was doing it in order to still leave the birds a place to rest and put their nests and things like that. But he didn't necessarily see it coming back to, well, the birds are going to pay him back one day. That wasn't ever mentioned in the poem where that happened, right? And so this is like an event from a long time ago by some measures anyway. He put into motion the things that were going to save him. And I don't know if there's necessarily any one thing to take away from that other than kind of like there being a good reason to take care of the world around you, because it will take care of you back when you're in need. And this isn't necessarily a part of the culture per se. This is still a representative of the natural world in the eagle, but the eagle saw that Väinämöinen treated it fairly and is willing to help when Väinämöinen is having some trouble. So the whole thing is, I don't want to say it's overly idealistic in terms of like the effects that stewardship or a well-maintained culture can have, because it's not like it's that predictable. It's not like you can say, well, because I do this thing, it's going to come back to me in this way down the line. Like by saving the birch tree, the eagle who liked the birch tree is going to save me from unconsciousness. But it's that those effects matter, and taking care of those important things matters. I think that's what it's saying here.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. It's kind of like, as someone who's famous to the show, Jordan Peterson would say, like, if you do something as small as like cleaning your room, that will ripple out to, let's say you now have a clean house. Let's say you've got all these things that are sort of sorted and taken care of. So when, something really bad happens, you don't have to worry about, coming home and finding something because your room is a mess. Like, it's right there. All of the peripheral annoying things in your day are kind of taken care of, and you can actually deal with the big thing that has like imposed itself on you and is, wrecking your life. Like, you don't have to worry about the small stuff. And so you can focus on that big thing that's coming after you.
Exactly. And it's such a great point. And I think in this case, this implies for Väinämöinen's situation that because he did all this stuff in the past and ordered the world and everything, he has a way out in this really, really tough situation. And maybe there is something there as far as just having the world as ordered as possible. When you go into chaos, you're going to have less chaos to deal with. I think that's a good way of putting it. And maybe you'll have even built things into your life that can help you out of a tough situation. So here the eagle has taken Väinämöinen, or the eagle's going to offer to take Väinämöinen wherever he wants. Shall we see where that takes us?
Let's see where he goes.
Okay. This is going to be lines 103 to 132. Back to the poem. Then the aged Väinämöinen raised his head from out the water. From the sea the man sprang upward. From the waves the hero mounted. On the eagle's wings he sat him, on the wing tips of the eagle. Then the bird of air, the eagle, raised the aged Väinämöinen. Through the path of wind he bore him, and along the east wind's pathway, to the utmost bounds of Pohjola, onwards to the misty Sariola. There abandoned, Väinämöinen soared into the air and left him. There stood Väinämöinen weeping. There stood weeping and lamenting on the borders of the ocean, on a land whose name he knew not, with 100 wounds upon him, by 1,000 winds belabored. And his beard was much disordered, and his hair was all entangled. Thus he wept for 2 and 3 nights, for as many days stood weeping. For the country round he knew not, and no path could he discover, which perchance might lead him homeward, back to a familiar country, to his own, his native country, where he passed his days aforetime.
The first thing I want to bring up is, I think we're clearly seeing where Tolkien got his idea for giant eagles saving hobbits and Gandalf at various points in the stories. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read it or seen it, you definitely should. But
It's been out for a couple, like 100 years, so
So I think your spoiler alert is like it's over, it's past. I guess you're not safe from it. But yeah, no, it's clear that one, we know that Tolkien was inspired greatly by Kalevala and the Norse stories, and we're seeing exactly where he got that part of it with the eagle saving Väinämöinen. I mean, it doesn't get much clearer than that. I think it's in the Two Towers, right? When Gandalf's at the top of the tower after fighting Saruman, and the eagle comes and saves him. Yeah,
and then right at the end, obviously.
Right at the end too. Yeah, where the eagles pick up Frodo and Samwise. So when I was reading that, I was like, "Oh, geez, this is where he got it." Like, awesome.
Well, and it fits too, right? Like even all the symbolism that you just talked about with the eagles and everything like that. It's like the apparatus of
absolutely
of order sort of thing that kind of comes in, and so it makes sense. I mean that's one of those story elements that's kind of like, oh, and then the eagles saved them. Why couldn't the eagles have just gone and dropped the ring into the mountain sort of thing? But well, here's why: you got to have the adventure, and then they can come
exactly
kind of help you when you need it.
Well. Yeah, because why didn't the eagle just bring him back to, to his beloved land? No, he's still got to be in the unknown and find his wife. So we have Väinämöinen. He's no longer in the water, so he's actually not really in imminent danger of dying anymore. But he's not at home. Everything is wrecked. His hair is a mess. He's crying because it's just things are so bad, and he's exhausted. And I think most people can relate to like that, where just everything has gone wrong, and the initial like imminent danger is kind of over, and now you're just kind of looking at the aftermath and what are you going to do now? And then you've actually got a moment to just fall apart and weep and cry and all that kind of stuff, and get all snotty and ugly cry. And that's what Väinämöinen is doing exactly. Is he's ugly crying because things are so terrible, and he's got that moment to do it because he's not going to drown if he just stops and cries. And so we're kind of waiting for him, like, what's he going to do? He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't see a path home. And it's just, he's completely in the unknown, but at least now he's got some control over what he does. Whereas in the ocean, he had no control. Here he's got like the most basic control of, he can choose where he goes.
Right. And exactly. It's the distinction between really just not even having the capability of doing anything, which I think if you're lost in the unconscious, that really is what that is. Like there's almost no possibility of taking any action from that. When you're in kind of that frame of mind, or you're in that situation, there's no possibility of taking action. Whereas here he's still in the unknown, but he's on land now. So therefore he does have that ability to do something. And I think that is the thing here with the eagle. Like the eagle isn't bailing him out 100%. He still has to go and do whatever it is he's here to do. Väinämöinen has to take action himself in order to get himself out. And I think something that points to something like, if you're depressed or in the underworld, in the unconscious, whatever, in any of these situations, which I think depression is a perfectly valid shorthand for a lot of these issues. Like it may not be properly, but having a hard time, being lost in the unknown, in your own mind, something like that. I think it says like you can get a helping hand from a friend, from a loved one, from someone who kind of helps you out of that. But that maybe can only take you out of like the imminent danger sort of thing, like really pull you back from the brink. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot that you have to do yourself in order to see yourself through these unknown situations, these situations that, whether by choice or not, that you find yourself in that are not the familiar. And that's certainly what Väinämöinen finds himself in here. He's in a completely unknown land, right? And that's by his choice too, though. That is by his choice. He just didn't pick the way he got there. He didn't foresee the way things were going to take him. And so the way he handled that initially, I think, well, first of all, he was kind of stuck, right? He was stuck in the unconscious, in the unknown, unable to do anything. And then he gets this helpful eagle to help him out of that, which I think in this context could be anything from a friend or a loved one or a doctor or something like that can help take you out of that situation. But there's still everything to do. There's the entire situation. You can't make your life circumstances go away, but you can take yourself out of the part where you just have no way forward. You don't see any possibility of action. You can take yourself out of that and finally have some way forward, some path forward.
This part, it reminded me a lot of like interviews with people who have had a significant like spiritual experience, sort of when they were at what they would call the rock bottom. So a lot of the times, like if you can find them on YouTube, and they're usually quite fascinating interviews. And I guess the example I'm going to use is like a born again Christian, because there are quite a few examples of this in the culture, and you can find them on YouTube pretty readily. But they generally all say the same thing, that, you know, their life was in shambles. In many cases, like they were using like hard drugs, that they were sort of at a point where they were either going to die or something crazy was going to happen and take them out of it. And in a lot of these cases for them, the crazy thing that happened was that they found God, and they found God's love, and that's what was able to pull them out. But it didn't fix all of their problems. All it did was it gave them a direction or something to aim for to get out. And I think we're seeing a very similar thing here, where the problems aren't gone, but the imminent danger isn't there, and there's a direction for them to move. And it's like, yeah, everything is still going to suck, but I at least have hope, really, is what's being given. So it doesn't seem like Väinämöinen has much hope yet, but there's at least he's still alive. And I mean, that's something, right? And I think as we go on, we'll see hope sort of return to him.
Yeah, he's alive. He's out of the ocean, which we've gone through the symbolism to death by now. But he's out of that. He's on land. And now there is the possibility of something happening. So shall we see if anything happens?
Let's see.
This is going to be lines 133 to 168. Back to the poem. But the little maid of Pohjola, fair-haired damsel of the household, with the sun had made agreement, and both sun and moon had promised they would always rise together, and they would awake together. She herself arose before them, ere the sun or moon had risen, long before the time of cock-crow, or the chirping of a chicken. From 5 sheep she shore the fleeces, clipped the wool from off 6 lambkins. In her loom she wove the fleeces, and the whole with care she carded. Long before the dawn of morning, long before the sun had risen. After this she washed the tables, swept the wide extending flooring, with the broom of twigs all leafless, then with broom of leafy branches. Then the sweepings she collected in the dustpan made of copper. Out of doors she took the rubbish, to the field beyond the farmyard, to the field's extremest limit, where the lowest fence has opening. There she stood upon the sweepings, and she turned around and listened. From the lake she heard a weeping, sounds of woe across the river. Quickly then she hastened homeward, and she hurried to the parlor. As she came, she told her tidings, in such words as those which follow. From the lake I hear a weeping, sounds of woe across the river.
Now, this is quite interesting, and we'll be getting into it more as we see what Louhi does. But there is an archetype that Joseph Campbell talks about in Hero with a Thousand Faces, where as the hero is journeying, through the unknown, he comes across a form of the divine feminine. And it is sometimes like a divine mother. Well, I guess it's always a divine mother, but it's either like good or bad. And one of the interesting attributes of the divine mother is that she's often represented as like a lady of the house of sleep. And we have this instance where this woman, Louhi, is waking up and getting everything, going about her day with her chores and cleaning up. And it's funny. She's ordering things if you've ever seen your mom, they often get up before the kids or with the kids and make sure everything's in order and the kids are taken care of, to go about their day. So I think we're going to be seeing the good form or the conscious form of the divine mother in Louhi. And also the power of the divine feminine that we see in many stories where the hero comes across the feminine in their adventure. So when it's sort of the good mother, the divine feminine is seen as like the paragon of all paragons of beauty, the incarnation of the promise of perfection, and all of the delightful things that you think of with a good mother, a provider, a nurturer. And I think we're seeing a lot of that just in this introduction to her, in that she's taking care of the house. She's friends with the sun and the moon. Like it's a very warm and inviting and lovely scene. Like if I was Väinämöinen and I saw this, I would be like, I will do whatever you want, but just like, let me rest here for a bit. Right.
Yeah, well, I want to say I don't think this is Louhi though. This is her daughter. This is one of her daughters, right? Because the distinctions made between the maid of Pohjola, like these little maids, we've been seeing them in the story. Like it's pretty good foreshadowing. Like it was in like Runo 2, I think, another one like where they've been sort of mentioned as these figures here, but Louhi would be the mother. She would be the mother. And so what Väinämöinen and all these other characters are going for is to get a chance to marry her daughters, which is the figure that we're looking at here and that you're describing. So I think symbolically it works. But Louhi is different though. She is the mother. Yeah.
Well, that works better because one of the parts of the paragons of like the woman is the paragon of beauty, but also of fertility and sexuality. And I was like, how does that work with the mother? That's weird. But this makes more sense.
Yeah. For Väinämöinen, what he wants is to find a mate who would be one of the daughters of,
for sure,
of Louhi. And so it takes the symbolism to kind of a different level, I think, here, because he wants this maiden, but he's going to have to go through Louhi, who we haven't even properly seen yet directly, but she's going to show up kind of immediately from here. But this is her daughter, and I think it's like she's, like you said, I mean, she's rising early, industrious, getting things done, able to provide do what's necessary for the household, everything like that, capable. And yeah, like you said, pretty good prize. So
almost worth it for being in the ocean for that long, right? Like, yeah.
almost worth it. Yeah. So shall we go and see? Because now I guess the maiden has heard Väinämöinen, and she's going to go tell her mother Louhi.
Sounds good.
Okay. This is going to be lines 169 to 202. Back to the poem. Louhi, Pohjola's old mistress, old and gap-toothed dame of Pohja, hastened forth into the farmyard, hurried to the fence's opening, where she bent her ear to listen, and she spoke the words which follow. This is not like childhood's weeping, nor like women's lamentation, but a bearded hero weeping. Thus weep men whose chins are bearded. 3 planks high the boat was builded, which she pushed into the water, and herself began to row it. And she rowed and hastened onward to the spot where Väinämöinen, where the hero was lamenting. There was Väinämöinen weeping. There Uvanto's swain lamented. But the dreary clumps of willow by the tangled hedge of cherry moved his mouth, his beard was shaking, but his lips he did not open. Then did Pohjola's old mistress speak unto, and thus addressed him. O thou aged man unhappy, thou art in a foreign country. Väinämöinen, old and steadfast, lifted up his head and answered, in the very words that follow. True it is, and well I know it. I am in a foreign country, absolutely unfamiliar. I was better in my country, greater in the home I came from.
Who isn't better in the home they came from and in their beloved country that they know, and they know how everything works? It's kind of like when you're like graduating from high school and you figured out how high school works, and then you have to go to university and try and figure all of it out again, or middle school to high school, right? Like, it's anytime you're going into that unknown, you're going from a place where you've kind of figured everything out to a place that you don't know what's going on, and in a lot of ways you're a little bit powerless. All the power that you had in your comfort zone is kind of gone. It's, not to get all eat, pray, love on it, but that idea that, what's that, like, there's that one saying that you can find in every Pinterest post and wall hang. It's like, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, or some like nice saying like that. I mean, it's not nearly that simple. It's like you have power in your comfort zone. You have, because it's a place that you've mastered. That's why you're comfortable there. That what's going to happen. In the unknown, you don't know what's going to happen. And so you've got Väinämöinen and sitting there lamenting that he's lost a lot of his power, and then you have these, this divine mother coming to meet with him, and that's one that's very typical in a hero's journey, which is, I think, is neat, especially because this book wasn't like The Hero with 1,000 Faces was written well after Elias Lönnrot compiled this, so he was going from a traditional, I guess, format of stories, and not like, oh, this is how I should write it because Joseph Campbell says so. And now if I've got this right, Louhi, this is Louhi that he's speaking with now, because her daughter let her. Okay, perfect. All the maidens and mistresses, I think I just disregarded them, like, okay, same word, whatever. Like, But no, it's actually very important for for the story. And so she's going to check out why Väinämöinen is here and like what's going on. You're in a foreign land. Like this is like, why would you do this to yourself?
Exactly. And I mean the right off the bat, the distinguishing between Louhi and her daughters is like, well, she's old and gap toothed, but she is the mistress, the dame of Pohjola. Like Pohjolan emäntä is the Finnish title essentially, which pretty much directly means mistress of Pohjola, but I do want to make the distinction in that it's like what I get from that phrase is that it's very regal, almost like this is her realm. She owns this. This is her area, and so she's powerful. She's not the one Väinämöinen wants to marry because she's already had a whole bunch of daughters, sort of thing, and is presumably done with the reproduction, sort of thing. But Väinämöinen still wants to tap into this potential, and he may not fully know yet where we are exactly here, what the implication of getting involved with Louhi is, or that her daughters would be so desirable, everything like that. He may not know that directly, but I think on some subconscious level, certainly he does, because this was almost an element of the culture that was already there. His mother in the previous stanza, or two stanzas ago, I guess. I can't remember. And I meant Runo. Two poems ago. She said, go out and seek out the maidens of Pohjola, like the daughters of Louhi, is very specifically what that is here. So yeah, her being this matriarch, this great mother, this is going to be quite the encounter, an important encounter. And as I was saying at the beginning, I mean, this is going to set some things in motion. The entire story is really starting now, for real. Like the proper story is starting now. Once we get to the end of today's poem, anyway. I thought it was really, I don't want to say funny. The imagery was funny. Like, this isn't a child's weeping. This isn't a woman's weeping. This is a bearded hero weeping. This is the way a man weeps who's got a bearded chin. I didn't know that having a beard made you cry any differently, but maybe the implication is something like men didn't shave their beards back in the day or something like that, so therefore that would make sense. But
well, I know in some cultures like Rome, for example, in times of mourning you wouldn't shave. So maybe that's what they're referring to, something like that, or maybe something else. I mean, if anyone has any insight on this, let us know. It's a fascinating distinction to make. Like, oh no, this sounds like a bearded man crying. Especially today, we don't really think of, big, tough, bearded men crying. So it's...
Well, I think that's an interesting point here too. I mean, first of all, my thought was what distinguishes on sound a bearded man from an unbearded man, right? So I don't necessarily know that you could tell by sound, but yeah, I think this is actually a great point here, because for whatever reason we've got the stereotype or whatever of the big muscular mighty man who never cries sort of thing, but then you got Väinämöinen in here ugly crying, like he's like the imagery, his beard was shaking, like they're going all the way here, like he's having a cry, he's dealing with his emotions sort of thing. It's healthy, it's part of, I won't even say masculinity, I'll say like dealing with one's emotions is part of the human experience. You've got them, and dealing with them in any which way is healthy. And sometimes you got to have a cry. Like that's just something there. It's maybe not what we associate with masculinity, but that doesn't mean it's inaccessible, right?
This is where like half of our listeners just turned off and like, well, we're done with Northern myths and crybabies.
Yeah, well, I guess it's always a risk, huh? When you say what's on your mind. But no, for this though, like he's got a purpose for this. He's in a tough situation, and he's dealing with it. He probably thinks he's alone, and so I mean maybe he's whatever embarrassed or something like that, or maybe I'm reading into that because I mean I think in some ways it's a personal thing to kind of let your emotions out sort of thing. And maybe these days there is some kind of whatever, a movement or what have you for making it more acceptable for men to cry openly, something like that. And I personally don't know that I would like to be ugly crying out in public sort of thing, but certainly I have no trouble with if I'm having a tough time or I'm sad. You know, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, but it'll probably be in my bedroom sort of thing. So
In the shower, because the water will hide the tears.
that's right. That's right. No one will hear.
You know, it's funny. I remember there's a guy in my high school who, like, big tough guy, kind of not really a bully, but he liked to fight. But when he fought, he would cry because it was just sort of this like outlet of tension and emotion while he was fighting. But he always won, so it was just like, one, no one made fun of him. Like, it was just like, crap. Like, okay, this is just, he's giving it his all. He's, you know, inflamed by passion and crying and fighting. It was like, okay. So you knew too, like, if he started crying, you knew he was like getting really amped up, ready to fight. So it was just like, oh crap. Like,
That's your cue to maybe get out of the line of fire.
yeah. Yes, definitely. I wonder too, when we were talking about in the last Runo, so the last Kalevala episode, the play between Joukahainen and Väinämöinen is sort of the Väinämöinen being the old civilization and Joukahainen being the new upstart generation who thinks they can do better and overthrow the terrible oppressiveness of, you know, the civilization that's given them everything that's good in life. I wonder if we're kind of seeing like the aftermath of what happens when societies and civilizations go through this change where for the younger generation, they kind of attack the establishment, and in a way that's almost lethal. And it's kind of this tumultuous time of, it's almost a revolution, right? And in a lot of cases, the old established way of doing things in the society, they don't know how to counteract or even just react to this new revolutionary way of thinking or this new generation. And I mean, that's why you, in the stories, you have to go resurrect your father. You have to rejuvenate it. And one, I mean, we've got Väinämöinen sort of in the heart of the unknown and possibility and chaos. I mean, he's meeting with the mistress of Pohjola. Like, you don't get any more, I guess you don't get any more like deep into the unknown, or, oh, my words are failing me. What's possibility? Like, there's just so much possibility here.
Potential.
Thank you, man alive. I don't know why that wasn't coming, but yeah, so much potential here. And so, like, Väinämöinen, he doesn't see the potential of the situation yet, and that's why he's weeping. He feels like he's going to lose it all, and then potential just like knocks on his door and is like, "Hey, like, what's going on here?"
Yeah, it's interesting. It's at the lowest point that Väinämöinen could be. Really, he's getting this opportunity, and we'll see what that opportunity really looks like as we go here. But yeah, it's sort of like being open to, well, there's a saying, and now it's gonna be my turn to not remember something exactly, but isn't it something like just taking advantage of life when it comes across you, something like that? Like, I'm thinking of a particular saying, but it's not coming, but it's
like seize the day.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Well, it's more like just taking advantage of the opportunities that come your way, like when they're there. And I think that is one of the big differentiators for life outcomes, is just taking opportunities when they exist. And I mean, you can put them down to luck or them being available, but it also takes a person taking the opportunity in front of them, sort of thing. So, well, we'll certainly see what Väinämöinen does with it. But I just thought that this entire imagery, this whole thing was interesting as far as the hero can cry. That's perfectly fine. And now he's going to meet with Louhi. So shall we see where this goes?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Väinämöinen had just said, he had acknowledged that he is from a foreign country. It was better in my country, greater in the home I came from. This is going to be lines 203 to, I think we're going to go a fair ways here. Yeah, 289, 88, 288. Yeah, 203 to 288. Back to the poem. Louhi, Pohjola's old mistress, answered in the words which follow. In the first place, you must tell me, if I may make bold to ask you, from what race you take your lineage and from what heroic nation? Väinämöinen, old and steadfast, answered in the words which follow. Well, my name was known aforetime and in former days was famous, ever cheerful in the evenings, ever singing in the valleys, there in Väinölä's sweet meadows, and on Kalevala's broad heathlands. But my grief is now so heavy that I know myself no longer. Louhi, Pohjola's old mistress, answered in the words which follow. Rise, O man, from out the marshes. Hero, seek another pathway. Tell me now of thy misfortunes and relate me thy adventure. Thus she made him cease his weeping, made the hero cease lamenting, and into her boat she took him, bade him at the stern he be seated, and herself resumed the oars, and she then began to row him unto Pohjola o'er water, and she brought him to her dwelling. Then she fed the famished stranger, and she dried his dripping garments. Then she rubbed his limbs all stiffened, and she warmed him and shampooed him, till she had restored his vigor, and the hero had recovered. After this, she spoke and asked him, in the very words which follow, Why didst weep, O Väinämöinen? Why lament, Uantolainen? In that miserable region on the borders of the lakelet. Väinämöinen, old and steadfast, answered in the words which follow. Cause enough I have for weeping, reason too for lamentation. In the sea I long was swimming, tossed about upon the billows, on the wide expanse of water, out upon the open ocean. I must weep throughout my lifespan and lament throughout my lifetime that I swam beyond my country, left the country so familiar, and have come to doors I know not, and to hedge gates that I know not. All the trees around me pain me, all the pine twigs seem to pierce me. Every birch tree seems to flog me, every alder seems to wound me. But the wind is friendly to me, and the sun still shines upon me in this unaccustomed country and within the doors I know not. Louhi, Pohjola's old mistress, answered in the words which follow. Do not weep, O Väinämöinen, nor lament, Uantolainen. Here 'tis good for thee to sojourn and to pass thy days in comfort. Salmon you can eat at table, and beside it pork is standing. But the aged Väinämöinen answered in the words which follow. Foreign food I do not relish in the best of strangers' houses. In his land a man is better, in his home a man is greater. Grant me, Jumala, most gracious, O compassionate Creator, once again to reach my country and the land I used to dwell in. Better is a man's own country, water from beneath the Sabbath, than in unfamiliar countries, mead to drink from golden goblets.
This to me looks like just a textbook example of the meeting between the hero and the divine feminine in the adventure. She's Louhi, I believe it's Louhi, right? Yes, the
Louhi.
Louhi, man alive. Yes, so Louhi is taking care of Väinämöinen, doing motherly things. She's rubbing his limbs that, I mean, they must be sore from being in the ocean for 9 days. Like, that would be rough. Feeding him incredible food like salmon and pork. That is a good meal right there. And saying, like, you can rest here. You know, she's really, makes me think of Pinocchio, where she's the, is it the good witch, or there's a good witch in like all these fairy tale stories, but basically that female representation of the good life and home and of paradise. And it kind of reminds the hero of home, but also of what the hero is striving for at the other end of the adventure. It's sort of in some ways it's like it's a call to adventure, as in, if you go through this, remember all these good things, you'll have them again. And so we see it all being set up for Väinämöinen and sort of for the story to come.
For sure. And she's even saying, like, he's allowed to stay there, though. And then so Väinämöinen as well, he's also saying, like, well, yeah, but this is nice, but I still want my own familiar place and all that. And I mean, I think that's important for anyone, right? Because even just on the symbolic level, being in the known territory, like that's important on a psychological level, as you've said. Like, we need to be there in order to charge up for any venture out into the unknown. And Väinämöinen's obviously overextended himself here, and he wants to get back to his land. And Louhi's done a job restoring him. Like, she is almost making Väinämöinen in her debt over all this, right? Over restoring him, shampooing him. Yes, that word was actually in the translation, so that must have been a word in use in the early 1900s. I just think that's a little funny. And she's done all this, and she's being incredibly hospitable to him. And now, I mean, if she's going to ask him for anything, I think Väinämöinen is kind of in her debt at this point. Although I think the main thing that he wants is to get home, and maybe she's going to be the way for that to happen. I do want to point out here that this is the first properly Christian section of influence that I think we've come across here so far. As long as this is direct in the translation and all that, I don't see why it wouldn't be why they said Jumala. Jumala would have been a Finnic god originally, some type of a creator god or sky god or something like that. But Jumala eventually became the word for God in the Finnish language, like the Christian God or the generic God. And so, grant me, Jumala, most gracious, O compassionate creator. In this case, the usage, I could see it being possible that this is referring to like the proper Jumala God, but I haven't seen it anywhere else. And so my only thought here is that this would have been just a nice poetic turn of phrase inserted by the compiler, potentially using Christian language. I just want to point that out, but it is entirely possible that would have actually been like what was there originally as far as the older type of God. I don't know enough about this specific passage, but the use of the word, that makes me think that this was kind of a later insertion. I won't say that about the entire thing. There's a lot of the Kalevala, that a lot of the imagery, the language, the constructions and things, those are put in place for the poetry and as mnemonic devices and as remembering it, all that sort of thing. Like it's not quite the same as the type of poetry that we see in the Poetic Edda, where it's dense, very dense in terms of meaning. They appear to use their words as sparingly as possible. In a lot of cases, there are times where in the Poetic Edda it's a lot of narrative, and that's what's happening. But in here, in the Kalevala, they take a lot of poetic structures. Not that they don't do that in the Poetic Edda. They make use of poetic structures. I'm just saying that I think it's different. They use these larger poetic phrases which fit into the meter and the rhyming pattern, and so in this case, I could see this being inserted as just something that sounds good and appropriate here, and is contrasting in what has happened. But I'm just saying this is potentially a bit of Christian language here.
That's pretty neat. I was wondering where we might start seeing influences. So as a possibility, it's interesting to think about. Something that just occurred to me with Väinämöinen is that he's saying that he does want to leave this area with Louhi, and the food and the comfort and everything that's presented to him. We don't see it in this story in particular, but in many stories, part of the hero's journey is leaving this sort of underworld or unknown, because you can go there and you can find, especially with sort of the divine feminine and its good nature, you can find like a paradise. And if you get stuck there, then you don't complete the part of the hero's journey that is, returning to the normal life, but with your newfound knowledge and power. You could just stay there. And I think sometimes we'll see that with people who, again, have gone through a really tough time, and then they sort of find that thing that pulls them out, and they sort of latch onto it, and they never move away from it. It's like, no, this is the best thing. I'm not going any further than here. I'm comfortable here. There's actually even a psychological term for it, for someone who's gone through trauma, where it's kind of like a healthy denial. It's not quite denial, but you've accepted it, but now you're able to manage it and you're comfortable. So you don't try and move past the trauma anymore, because that's hard work, and you have to relive it and go through all that messy stuff. But you can like function again in normal life, and things are pretty good, and you can live like a good normal life. And most people actually sort of stay there. It's not as many people will get out of that comfortable area to I guess put the effects of the trauma to rest, like permanently. And so staying here is a good option. Like that's a good life right there. But for Väinämöinen and for the hero's journey, they require leaving that sort of paradise so that they can return home with whatever treasure or new power that they found.
Yeah, it's the next step. He's in this, I like the way you put it, that it's kind of this familiar place, but still in the unknown. It's not home. I like it. He's going to have to, he knows he's going to have to move on in order to get where he's really properly going. So shall we see what that kind of looks like here?
Let's do it.
Okay, this is going to be lines 289 to 322. Back to the poem. Louhi, Pohjola's old mistress, answered in the words which follow. What are you prepared to give me if I send you to your country, to the borders of your cornfields, or the bathhouse of your dwelling? Said the aged Väinämöinen. Tell me then what I shall give you, if you send me to my country, to the borders of my cornfields, there to hear my cuckoo calling, and my birds so sweetly singing, Will you choose a gold-filled helmet or a hat filled up with silver? Louhi, Pohjola's old mistress, answered in the words which follow. O thou wisest Väinämöinen, thou the oldest of the sages, golden gifts I do not ask for, and I wish not for thy silver. Gold is but a toy for children, silver bells adorn the horses. But if you can forge a sampo, weld its many-colored cover, from the tips of swans' white wing plumes, from the milk of barren heifer, from a single grain of barley, from a single fleece of ewe's wool, then will I my daughter give you. Give the maiden as your guerdon, and will bring you to your country, there to hear the birds all singing, there to hear your cuckoo calling on the borders of your cornfields.
So this is the deal that Louhi is willing to make with Väinämöinen. And she asks for the creation of the sampo. And the sampo is, I think Luke, you'll be able to get into more detail with it, but it's essentially like magical technology. And with magical technology, well, one, we don't really know what it does yet, other than that it's obviously quite valuable. And I take this to mean that, well, actually between the sampo and the marriage to her daughter, what you're seeing is the method with which Väinämöinen would be able to rejuvenate himself, right? You got Väinämöinen, you've got this innovative magical technology, and you've got, a daughter of Pohja, a maiden of Pohja. You've got all the elements there to create one, like a divine marriage, so a hieros gamos, and to give birth to the divine son. That is the new thing that will take sort of the best of Väinämöinen, the best of the unknown, and create sort of this, if we're using the idea that Väinämöinen is civilization and culture, you're going to have something new that takes the best of sort of everything and will rejuvenate the culture and everything. So it's sort of the recipe for Väinämöinen's salvation here.
Right. And I mean, the thing here is that now this gives him a goal. He's got something to latch onto that he can pursue. I think the main issue with him earlier in this poem was that he didn't have something to aim for, even though he sort of did. It's weird. He kind of had this interesting pseudo goal, I suppose, this kind of mythical goal of go get one of the maidens of Pohjola. Okay, what's step one? I mean, step one he took, which was go out into the unknown, but beyond that, he didn't really have anything to tell him what to do, where to go. But now he's got something specific that he can do. Still quite the task. And the thing is, the sampo doesn't exist yet. And maybe I'll get into just a little bit about the sampo. And we've touched on this before, previous episodes, a little bit, just briefly. But what it is some kind of mythical artifact, which I think the idea of mythological technology, like magical technology, like that's perfect. That's a perfect way of explaining it, because we don't know what it does. And this is not even just right now. Like, we don't know what the sampo is. That's something that's either been lost or has remained a mystery intentionally. It could be almost anything, as far as all of these great things. It's almost like your imagination. You imagine what the sampo is. You put into it what you think is so great about it. Like, it's just this ultimate thing that in most cases it's described as something that generates wealth out of nothing, or that generates prosperity, or that generates the means of the means of supporting oneself, things like that. Like in a more the most traditional sense, it's usually described as some kind of a mill that can create flour or salt or gold by its own volition, sort of thing. And so that's all, like, that gives you food, that gives you wealth, that allows a society to prosper unlimited if it can create all these things out of nothing. There is also a theory that the Sampo is the equivalent of the world tree or world pillar seen in other mythologies elsewhere. But I think if it were the case that it is some kind of a world pillar, it's like supporting the sky. I think it would be the most direct and concrete form of that. It would be like, let's create the thing that supports the sky, and therefore we've got this connection to the sacred, like right here. It makes whatever place that it exists in the center of the world, essentially. So that would be one way for the Sampo to manifest. Again, we don't know what exactly it is, but I think there is something to, like, it is what you believe it is.
Yeah, it seems to almost be like a symbol of innovation or the next great technology. And I can see actually how it would be both the center of the world, but like a world tree and technology, and do all this kind of stuff. Think of how many times in human history a new technology has changed everything and kind of become the center of what we're able to do, right? Like, it's like, I would argue one example right now would be like the internet, where we don't even know what the full ramifications or the full capabilities of having the internet is yet. Like, we're just sort of scratching the surface of things that it can do and how it connects us. So yeah, no, it's sort of that idea of innovation and something. What's the next new thing that's going to happen that will, revolutionize the human experience? That's interesting. And I also like how it's made from a bunch of things that are very unlikely or don't exist, like the milk of a barren heifer. It reminds me of the chains of Fenrir made from like the roots of mountains, and the sound that cat's footsteps make, that kind of thing. It provides a mythic quality to it, and shows that it kind of shows like anything can be the Sampo. Like you were saying, that we don't know what goes into making it because these things don't really exist. But if you can get them all together, and think of all the inventions that were, someone might describe as like catching lightning in a bottle, or just like sort of dumb luck happened and the right elements came together at the right time with the right person, and now we've got something incredible, right?
Exactly. And I really like the idea that the Sampo is something like that innovation or whatever. And I guess the idea would be that whoever has the Sampo is the civilization, the society that is best prepared to bring the world into a new phase of prosperity, things like that. Like, this is a mythical idea, but it's also concrete in that we have seen this mythical idea in action. But the question is always, who's going to have the next one? What's the next one going to look like, right? And I mean, where we are now, like 1,000 years ago, humanity looked very, very different from the way we look now. What's humanity going to look like 1,000 years from now? And it's going to take these innovations, these things that we aren't expecting, that we don't know how to describe, to get us there. And yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And maybe just to bring this back here a little bit. So the Sampo doesn't exist yet. And so this task set out to Väinämöinen is not really all that much easier than the slightly more open-ended task that he had before, but it's a goal. It's something concrete he can latch onto. And really, so this is something that Jocko Willink talks about. He works a lot with he talks a lot too as well, ex-military members from whether it's the Navy SEALs or special forces or any branches in the military, he always talks about like when he's talking to them, giving them advice, one of the biggest things is to find your next mission, right? So after leaving the military, for example, like that can be a time of significant stagnation and even feeling like depressed, hopelessness, whatever, because there isn't that routine anymore that the military would have provided, and the missions, the goals, the things like that were constantly being provided or that you had to come up with or whatever. And the most successful veterans that he talks to are the ones who just go and find their next mission and go and find the next thing. And so, I mean, this is something concrete in the real world. Like finding the next mission is important. And here we go. Väinämöinen's got one. So I darn well think he's out from the unconscious, and he's got a way back. He's got a way back into mastering the world around him. But it's a hard task though. And the person who can forge a sampo, that's the reward is going to be great. So
shall we look to see who can forge a sampo?
Let's do it. Okay, this is going to be lines 323 to 338. Just a quick thing to introduce someone important. Back to the poem. Väinämöinen old and steadfast, answered in the words which follow. No, I cannot forge a sampo, nor can weld its pictured cover. Only bring me to my country, and I'll send you Ilmarinen, who shall forge a sampo for you, weld its many-colored cover. He perchance may please the maiden, win your daughter's young affections. He's a smith without an equal. None can wield the hammer like him, for 'twas he who forged the heaven and who wrought the air's foundations. Yet we find no trace of hammer, nor the trace of tongs discover.
It's funny, we've come all this way. Väinämöinen's looking for his wife, and Louhi sets out this task for him, and he's like, I can't do it. But, being a good guy, Väinämöinen's like, but I know this guy. He'd be perfect for it. So he's setting him up for, a maiden of Pohjola. And Ilmar, I'm going to say it's probably wrong, Ilmarinen. Okay. Butcher it in my English. He is a sky god and a smith god. He kind of, when I was reading descriptions of him, he kind of reminded me of Thor a little bit, but also of Voland or Wayland. Like if you were to put the two together, that's kind of what what you're looking at. And it's interesting. Sky gods are usually the ones that create order out of chaos, and I think that's exactly what we have here. Is smiths as well. I mean, they take the raw materials of the earth and forge them into something. I don't want to say useful, but ordered. Instead of just having like a lump of iron, you can forge it into something that humans can use as a tool. And so, I think it makes sense to have both of these roles filled by one god. That makes all the sense to me. I do think it's interesting that Väinämöinen is kind of, he's almost like he's giving a referral for Ilmarinen, like just because Väinämöinen is not able to build a sampo, and I think that says that like the old culture, the old society isn't able to bring in innovation itself. Something new has to happen, and let's bring in this god who seems to be able to do something with that.
Yeah, and the whole thing with Ilmarinen, he's definitely going to be an important figure in that if we're going with the sampo as shorthand for innovation or a symbol of innovation, then he's the one who's going to set that in motion. too. So there's aspects of creation there as well, but it's an interesting point. Like Väinämöinen is still the hero of the story, and I mean, he's doing he's playing a big role here if all he does is hook these two people up, like making connections. That's important, right? And there's that ability to do that. That's not trivial. But Väinämöinen may not necessarily get the main reward he's going for, which would be a maiden of Pohjola to marry, but he might get to go home. So he's getting one of the things that it's not the thing he went out for originally, but he's going to get home safe, and that's important. So a little bit about Ilmarinen. So he is a sky god. In fact, his name derives from the word for the air or the sky, and it's the same root word as Ilmatar, who we met in the very first episode on the Kalevala there, sort of the maiden of the air. So Ilma is the word for air or sky, more used specifically for air today in Finnish, but I understand that it would have had the meaning of like the sky or the heavens. And Ilmarinen is just a direct derivative of that. Ilmari is kind of like one of the sky, and Ilmarinen, adding that last syllable there, actually just makes it work better with the poetry. So it's like adding like a diminutive, like John or for Johnny for John sort of thing. It's the same kind of idea, but it fits with the poetry. We see all these names like Väinämöinen, Joukahainen, Lemminkäinen, Ilmarinen. 4 syllables works very well with the poetry as opposed to 3. So that's, as I understand, the reason for the name to be in that form. But Ilmari would also be another form that would work, and he's a sky god. There's speculation that he was originally kind of more of a prototypical sky god, and his role as a smith would have come in when interacting with Baltic or Germanic cultures who had some better idea of how to do smithing, and so they associated it with one of their particular gods. And obviously they gave him he forged the heaven, wrought the air's foundations. Like they gave him a particular purpose there, which distinguishes him from, say, Ukko, who is like another sky god. They've got a lot of sky gods in this particular tradition, but he's kind of more like the top level creator sort of thing, versus Ilmarinen, like he's the kind of the one of the sky, the one of the heavens, and I guess his role eventually became he's the one who created them. So that's just a little bit about Ilmarinen, and we'll obviously see him a bit more as we go, as long as Väinämöinen takes up this particular challenge.
Shall we see if he does?
Let's do it. Okay, this is going to take us to the end. We're going from lines 339 to 368. Back to the poem. Louhi, Pohjola's old mistress, answered in the words which follow. I will only yield my daughter, and my child I promise only, to the man who welds a sampo, with its many-colored cover, from the tips of swans' white wing plumes, from the milk of barren heifer, from a single grain of barley, from a single fleece of ewe's wool. Thereupon the colt she harnessed, in the front she yoked the bay one, and she placed old Väinämöinen in the sledge behind the stallion, and she spoke and thus addressed him. In the very words which follow, do not raise your head up higher, turn it not to gaze about you, that the steed may not be wearied, till the evening shall have gathered. If you dare to raise your head up or to turn to gaze around you, then misfortune will o'ertake you and an evil day betide you. Then the aged Väinämöinen whipped the horse and urged him onward, and the white-maned courser hastened noisily upon the journey, forth from Pohjola's dark regions, Sarjola forever misty.
I like this a lot because we see this type of trope in a lot of different mythologies that are great, where to escape from the unknown or the underworld or sometimes even worse. It's like you can go, but the requirement is you have to do something on your journey out, whether it's not look around you or stay up for a certain amount of time, or not look back. And just off the top of my head, I can think of a few examples. So the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice, where Orpheus and Eurydice get married, and shortly thereafter, Eurydice comes upon a forest nymph. The nymph wants Eurydice. She tries to avoid him and then steps too close to a poisonous snake, gets bit, and dies. Orpheus goes mad with grief and starts playing his lyre. And for those of you who don't know the story, he's like the world's best musician. He's the son of Apollo. And so when he plays the lyre, like the whole world cries, and they're like, oh my God, you need to stop this. Okay, go get Eurydice from the underworld and bring her back. Like, we're going to make this allowance for you. And he goes down there, and the only catch is that he can't look behind him to see if she's following as he makes his way out of the underworld. And then as he's just about to come out of the underworld, he takes a step and then looks behind him to grab her hand to help her out. And he sees her, and then she vanishes, and she'll never, be with him again. Then there's Gilgamesh, who does something very similar. His best friend, Enkidu, they go around fighting monsters and gods and have a good time. But then eventually Enkidu gets poisoned and dies. And I highly recommend reading the translation of Gilgamesh, particularly the part where Enkidu dies, because they don't have all of the tablets. So there's a whole bunch of it that's just missing or gone. So you'll read like Enkidu talking about himself dying, and I see a great beast with talons, and then it'll just be like ... because they don't have the words that come after it. Ripping, scratching, tearing ... I see the darkness ... and it's terrifying. It's amazing. I highly recommend reading it. Not if you're in like a good mood, but just if you're in the mood to like read something very moving and something that really gets to I think the heart of dying. Like, it's really good. You'll definitely get something out of it. And then, so to get his friend back, Gilgamesh goes to the underworld, and they say, okay, your friend can come back if you're able to stay up for 6 or 7 days and nights. And then I think it's the 7th night he eventually falls asleep, like right before dawn, and his friend, he'll never get to see his friend again. And then there's Sodom and Gomorrah, where Lot and his wife are escaping Sodom, and then Lot's wife looks back and turns into a pillar of salt. And so these are all examples of stories where the failing of humans, the human frailty, prevents them from traveling between the underworld and the unknown and the waking conscious world freely. There's always a price to be paid for humans to travel that way, and we don't do it very well. Like, otherwise, imagine what we could do if we could take everything in the unconscious and bring it to light and fully integrate it into ourselves. We'd literally be superhumans, right? But that's just not how humans are. So there's always that catch where it fails, because you're not supposed to be able to bring something so incredible, like bringing someone back to life from the depths of the underworld and bring them back into the waking world. On the other hand, in places like Polynesia and other Greek stories, they have stories where they successfully bring someone back from the dead, or the hero doesn't look back and is fine, but the hero is always a god, and they're always divine, and they have that extra power that allows them to travel freely between, the consciousness and the unconsciousness. So I don't know what we're going to see here because I haven't read like later on, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with Väinämöinen if they give him more of a human touch where, he looks around from the sledge, or if he'll be more divine and able to, he's able to resist the urge and things go well for him.
Yeah, and I mean this is the end of the poem, right? And so they don't continue. I also haven't I don't have the immediate what's following kind of right at the front of my mind, but in this one they don't have like an exact consequence or like what would happen if he does or does not, and I don't know. But the thing there is that it's almost like some remnant of some similar mythology, right? Like it's so interesting how these things crop up, right? And it's not so much that it's to have all these things in common with it. It shows the underlying meaning. Like Väinämöinen's doing something important, and he is at risk of straying, right? And the real gist of these stories in a lot of cases is something like you have to be like fully focused on what you're doing, right? And if you get pulled astray, then you're going to lose it, something like that, right? Like that's one of the underlying elements on that. So having Väinämöinen definitely have to focus on whatever he's doing, like it shows the importance of the task he's on. And it also speaks to that he's still in the unknown at the moment and he doesn't know where he's going. And I guess maybe his horses know or something like that. Like that's the magic of it all, right? But here we go. Väinämöinen is off on a quest, and he's got something he can do. He's got something that he can do with his life to give it meaning. He's out from the unknown, from the depths of his own mind, and here we go. This is going to be the rest of the story from here.
And it's a good way to start like the real adventure with this cryptic, like you can't look around when we drive you back. But yeah, no, I'm excited to see where it goes from here and how Ilmarinen and the Sampo all fits in and all this kind of stuff. So I think we're in store for a good story.
Absolutely. And again, I will just say, like, it's not going to be the only story in the Kalevala that I've mentioned. There's sort of some sub stories that bring in other heroes. It's really like this 1 to 10 is like the first Väinämöinen cycle. Like that's what it's kind of properly referred to as. And so we've got we're doing 7. So 8, 9, and 10 are going to be in this, from this story proper, but it's also going to ripple out through, and it's going to be like in the 30s and 40s and stuff like that we visit this stuff. Everything relating to Väinämöinen is really kind of starting here now. So yeah, this is going to take us quite some time to get through, obviously, at the pace we're going, and we're going to enjoy it, have a lot of fun with it. So
yeah, I can spend all the time in the world in the land of heroes, so I'm good to go.
All right. Well, I think that does it for today's episode then. I can't think of a better way to end it. And I think we're actually properly recapped too as far as what's happened. So I think we're just going to wrap up.
Yeah, sounds good.
And before our usual housekeeping and everything like that, I did want to go to and acknowledge something that I have said that we would cover in the past here. And first of all, we have gotten a few iTunes reviews since we last recorded, and I did just want to give a little shout out and some appreciation first to Moonrock Oh Wow from the USA. Says in-depth and insightful. When I first came across this podcast, I admit I found the length of each episode a little intimidating and wasn't sure I was ready to hear a couple of guys ramble on for hours at a time. I'm glad I decided to put that aside and give it a listen. Well, thank you very much. There's more to the review, and certainly we appreciate the entire thing here. But just that sentiment alone is pretty good because, yeah, this is quite the commitment. Spending time with us all this time, we certainly appreciate if you take the time to listen with us and you're enjoying what you're hearing. It means a lot to us. So
For sure. And for the record, I think we're also intimidated by the length of some of these episodes. They, we'll be finished recording and look at the time and be like, how did that happen?
we've gotten better at judging how long these are going to take. Like I figured this one would be right around the 2 hour mark, and we're just under that at this point. But we had, I think, our most egregious ones for this was Grimness Mall near the beginning there. That one, and first of all, we thought we could do it in one go, and it ended up being like 3.5 hours, a little under 3 hours for the second part. Like it was a lot, and we had no idea. So
Yeah, no, I very much remember that one, and like being exhausted at the end, being like, what were we thinking? Like this, we did not know we were getting into with this one.
no, and that's the thing here too is that, I mean, as much as we can estimate, there's also a big element of not knowing where our discussion's going to take us. And I mean, maybe on the one hand, you could see that as rambling, or we've got another review here as well. And this one was 4 stars, and we appreciate that as well. We're not perfect by any means, so we appreciate if there's some constructive criticism. But this one from Watch the Throne Meh from the USA. Information is great, some pretty neat parallels drawn, and overall I would say it's good. Some those with a greater than cursory knowledge, I'm not sure if that was the whole sentence there, but episodes would benefit from a general exposition before beginning. As it is, the shows are extremely stream of consciousness, which detracts from their insights, which is frustrating. I would, however, recommend it and will keep listening. That is completely valid criticism, 100%. This is what we're about, though. This is the nature of what we're doing. What we're all about here is taking these ideas from these amazing, amazing stories and then just going with it. So I appreciate that if it's frustrating to you or to anyone, I appreciate you bearing with us for that, because this isn't something that we can really change here. It's not like we're scripting this out and we know exactly where it's going to take us. We get these ideas as we're recording a lot of the time, or we bounce things off each other, and that's just what happens. So
it's sort of one of the pitfalls of this format. But I guess we enjoy it like this, and obviously some people enjoy it like this, and we'll probably keep going. If for no other reason than selfishly, we have a lot of like moments where like the light bulb goes on for us, and we really enjoy those. And when we first started out, we wanted to be able to sort of capture that in the podcast. So like you would see us learning things as it happened, and we wouldn't have to pretend to be like, oh wow, that's so interesting. No, like most of the time it's, holy crap, I had no idea about that until you just said that. And then
that's right. And then we just go from there. I mean, we've been saying that's like us going down the rabbit hole sort of thing. And yeah, like that was happening a lot, especially early days as we were just digging into this stuff and really learning at the time. And so I appreciate that not everyone really is into that as much. But I think if you're joining us for as long as you are, and if are following along through the whole thing, I think there's some value to what we're doing there. So there's parts of what we're doing that we're not going to change, but appreciate the constructive criticism. And actually the other point was that some general exposition at the beginning. I'll admit we're kind of crappy at that sometimes. As far as like getting into the episode, it's kind of like, well, we can jot down some notes about what it's going to be, but we still haven't polished that part yet. So we can do better on quite a few things. We're certainly not perfect podcasters as much as we're not experts in what we're talking about. We're just learning in all respects here. So this sort of constructive criticism is very helpful, and we do listen to it. And if there are areas that we can meaningfully improve, we intend to. So
and a lot of the time, like, we're learning from each other on the like the mythological stuff, but there have also been times where we get constructive criticism. It's like, oh, geez, that's a good idea. Like, how did we not think of that? and then we do it, and it works out great. So
That's right. And the same goes for if we make a mistake during our episodes. This is if we haven't clearly stated that. Like if we got something wrong, please tell us and we'll correct it, whether it's in a future episode or in some description or something like that. Like I've made some relatively embarrassing mishaps as we've gone here just by crossing wires in my mind as I'm compiling notes or
mistresses, maidens. I mean, who knew, right?
That's right. So it's going to happen, and let us know if it does, and we're happy to correct it because we do not know everything here. We're not experts, and we're just doing our best to go through these fantastic stories. So again, thank you to that reviewer for the constructive feedback. And one last review, just to acknowledge that. So this from Arthur 1, and I think that's meant to say Arthurian, from the Netherlands. So isn't it just awesome to get someone from over there? Great exploration of Northern myths. What I like about these podcasts is that they read the stanzas of the poems and then take the time to explore these in depth, like what Jordan Peterson does for other mythologies. By taking the poems apart bit by bit, stories don't overwhelm you because there is ample time to meditate on the richness of what the lines convey. So, yeah, thank you very much for that. Glad you are enjoying the show, Arthurian from the Netherlands.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So with that, we do. I'll mention that we do get a little digest of our iTunes reviews sent to us once a month, but on other platforms we don't see them. And I do check for them from the stores from the States, Canada. But again, we got one from the Netherlands that I didn't see until we got this little email. So if you do send us a review and you'd like us to know about it, and you don't mind us mentioning it on the show, send it to us, tweet it to us, Facebook, whatever, and we'll be sure to mention it on the show. We're very happy and grateful for all these reviews. They're a big help to us to getting our show in front of more listeners and viewers, and that's just always something that we appreciate. So please do that. If you have left us a review somewhere that we just aren't seeing because we're not checking every single platform actively there, yeah, just let us know about it and we'll be sure to give you a shout out. So
absolutely.
Okay, I think that's just about it for that. And just our usual, we're on all the regular social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. And we're either Northern Myths or Northern Myths Podcast on all of those platforms. We're also personally on Twitter at NorthMythLuke and at NorthMythDan. And yeah, get in touch with us. Leave us a tweet, comment, message, anything like that. We're happy to chat and to have conversations about this stuff. Always happy to get in touch and hear different opinions, because on a lot of levels, like what we're talking about is we do our best not to inject any sort of bias or anything like that. But a lot of this stuff is our own interpretation. And so hearing other interpretations is always awesome. And yeah, just get in touch with us there if you like. And if you want to help spread the word, following us on all these platforms, sharing, it's always appreciated. Subscribe on YouTube, that's always really appreciated. And as we've said, reviews anywhere are a big help. So please do that if you have a second. Yeah, that we would really appreciate it. So. And we also do have a couple of ways to support the show if you would like. We've got our web shop with t-shirts and mugs with some of the designs from the show that you can purchase. And we've also got on our website a list of recommended books and music, which is through the Amazon affiliate program. It's books that we recommend that have been influential for us, as well as music from some of the really awesome guests we've had on the show. And if you make a purchase through any of those links, we see a little bit of that. So that's just another way you can help support the show if you like. And with that, am I forgetting anything, Dan?
Well, you've covered most of it, but I think there is one thing, and it's the most important thing, and it's for all of us to go find out which myth you're living.
This has been the Northern Myths Podcast. Thanks for listening.